Hello everybody, it's Wyvern here with another bit of Total War Warhammer 2 Quick Match gameplay. This time around we are on the Isle of the Crimson Skull playing as the Empire against the forces of Brettonia. And this is a matchup where I think it's, on paper, it's favorable to Brettonia. I think in practice it's a little favorable to Empire, but it's definitely a very tight match. There's a lot of different ways you can take it with both factions, despite the abilities on, say, Warrior Priest to really negate magic damage. Empire you can still bring, say, Real Knights to this match because it's not like Empire has a constant stream of magic resist coming out. At the same time, Empire Infantry, perhaps a little less cost effective than Brettonians, but Empire Artillery, of course, much better. Brettonia's has flyers, you can bring Royal Hippos, all sorts of stuff. All sorts of weird builds you can do with both factions. And so I was messing around with something. I decided to run with Balthazar. I've been having on a bit of Balthazar kick lately. He's obviously pretty fun. As we all know, he's just got that awesome look. He's got the awesome voice. There's just nothing bad about him. Here we do have him on a Quicksilver. I did bring him with Final Transmutation, Glittering Robe, and Searing Doom. I've been trying Glittering Robe a lot. In a lot of my matchups where I have Lord of Metal, I've been trying it out because the new 60 armor rather than plus 30 is just actually a pretty solid boost, especially for how cheap the spell is. Overcast, you pay 12 gold for 12 Winds of Magic for a AoE that can be a massive buff. So I really like that. Searing Doom, of course, great against melting Brettonian mobs. Metal shifting can help, especially in protracted engagement, and of course Final Transmutation is really nice for melting blobs of troops. Arcane Conduit as well as Staff of Alans, both very, very solid, just to get more Winds of Magic. And then, of course, for our strike force of heroes here, we do have a Warrior Priest. Now, the Warrior Priest here is in a very expensive format. We've got Soulfire, we've got Shield of Faith, we have Hammer of Sigmar, Benediction, and the Scroll of Power. The reason I really like Benediction, actually, is because what you'll find oftentimes is that players, now it doesn't matter so much with the Griffites because they've got Terra, but a lot of Brettonian players, well, especially myself, but some Brettonian players, other than myself as well, will like to bring Royal Hippogriffs. They'll bring, obviously, a Lewin. He's not a rarity. And surprisingly, if they start taking damage, Demigriffs will rout. They will Terra rout. And that could be a disaster. That can cost you a cavalry fight and the game, because these battles are usually decided by the cav fight. So the Warrior Priest adding that leadership is great. Alongside him, we do have an Empire Captain who's on a horse. He's got nothing fancy going for him, but he does have Hold the Line, which gets another +5 melee defense, makes these Royal Fights have a little more staying power. So basically, we're just trying to stack up these resistances and these buffs on a single unit. We do have the Scroll of Power on the Warrior Priest, so we can rewind and use his abilities once again, which is really, really nice. So you can get all these off twice in an engagement. Finally, on the other flank, we do have Demigriff Knights with Halberds again. Frontline, dirt cheap, bunch of trash troops, swordsmen, Sigmar Sons, 2 greatswords in the back. These guys got a little more leadership last patch, and then a few chevron up mortars in the back to provide artillery support and mulch through the cheap trash Brettonia tends to bring. Now, for my opponent's build, he did decide to go with a pretty conventional comp, I would say. A bunch of peasant mob in the front to soak up damage, a lot of foot squires. Despite their nerf to cost, foot squires are still a very good unit. They'll still trade okay with swordsmen and greatswords and all that sort of stuff. You can see the mortars there, unfortunately, whiffing a bit. They were supposed to be shooting at the archers, and instead they're shooting at foot squires. But they are going to start killing some archers here, and of course we want those archers off the field as soon as we can. A Damsel of Life is over here on a horse with Earthblood as well as Life Bloom and a Power Stone, so she's going to be a big menace. There's a few pole arms, some spears in the back to provide some additional protection. You can see the mortars raining in and really going to start mulching these poor guys. But my opponent's main strike force is this cav mob over here, the Companions of Canel, as well as the Knights of the Realm, and I make a huge misplay here. I tried to escape with my Demigriff Knights. They've got 75 speed to the 75 on this Scav, so they weren't able to quite escape as the charge animations kicked off. And that means I didn't get my charge off with these Demigriffs. Now, unfortunately for my opponent, though, he's about to get nuked by a Final Transmutation, which is going to hit this pocket and start melting it very heavily. You can see over here the Royal Fights diving in with the Warrior Priest active, and with all the buffs coming down, we're going to be able to really pound these guys into dust. But, you know, Lewin's there, and he's going to come in, and he's going to pop Stand Your Ground, he's going to pop Lion's Shield, he's going to pop the Sword of Corone, and really debuff everything. Fortunately, we are able to rout the Knights of the Realm, but a bit of a back-and-forth situation there, definitely some brutal stuff. And my opponent kind of coming out on top in this situation, despite the fact that things were not all that favorable for him. He's able to do quite a bit of hurt here. He's able to pound down on my Warrior Priest, munch on all these guys a little bit, and you know, my opponent, despite my rewind here using the Scroll of Power to get all these buffs again, you know, my opponent's holding out pretty strong, and although we do rout some of these troops from the field, they are, of course, only terrified, so they will come back. Front line in the meantime going rather badly for me. Now certainly the swordsmen here are going to win against peasants. That's not a contest. But as my opponent gets rid of my swordsmen, the foot squires are going to come in, or as he loses peasants, the foot squires are going to come in and really munch through these swords. Over here in the meantime, the great swords are going to start swinging out to support this flank. And my opponent just charges back in with the Knights of the Realm. They're going to get some good damage despite Glittering Robe on these demigryphs. They're not quite able to hold out. But, you know, we are able to rout some of these troops off. The Companions of Canel in full flight, the Knights of the Realm in full flight. Earthblood does go down, which is a big problem for me because it's going to heal some of these guys up. What I really should have done at this point is use Balthazar to chase the Knights of the Realm off the field. Companions of Canel with 8 models, not as much of a threat as rather healthy Knights of the Realm. Regardless, though, I am now trying to extricate myself as these peasants come in. This was a huge mistake for me. I need these greatswords in the fight much sooner, and this was a huge misplay. You need to, if your opponent starts feeding infantry into the fight, you need to get your own infantry into the fight and soak that enemy charge up. And unfortunately, the Royal Different Fight's getting bogged down, taking exorbitant losses here. And unlike my opponent, I don't have Lore of Life to heal. So this is a potential disaster in the making. I'm losing the Royal Different Fights left and right down to half strength on models and much less on HP. Like less than rather 20% HP here, so absolute disaster in the making, and we're barely able to escape with a fraction of our strength, basically due to my misplay there. So despite the fact the balance of power is slightly in my favor, I would say it's a bit of a fake news situation there. Now, interestingly enough, you can see the swordsmen here holding up rather well against the foot squires. With some chevrons, swordsmen are not pushovers in melee. They've got very respectable stats. These guys probably cost about 500 gold with these 3 chevrons, but they have very respectable stats, and they'll hold out against foot squires rather nicely. Elsewhere in the meantime, Louis is chasing after Balthazar, who has popped Arcane Conduit and is running for dear life because I have no intention of giving my opponent the opportunity to snipe Balthazar. In the meantime, I'm trying to bring my opponent's knights to the field and force them to fight. I want to take these Knights of the Realm down, and I really want to get rid of this cav contingent because it's such a huge threat. If my opponent at this point gets into my exposed backline, gets on these mortars, units like that, I'm going to be deep trouble. Fortunately, the men-at-arms, my opponent kind of forgot about him here. It happens in the thick of battle where he's chasing Balthazar there. So these pole arms over here are actually going to rout, largely due to the contribution from the mortar, which is very nice for me. But unfortunately, once again, misplay on my part. Although the Empire Captain gets on the Knights of the Realm here, they terror out, they're going to flee. My opponent is bogging me down with some peasants. And these Knights of the Realm are sneaking around. They're being real sneaky, and they're going to get through and get on my mortars. And the mortars still have some ammo left, which is important to keep in mind. These guys are not out of ammo. They still got 40, they've got 46 kills, 50 over there. Unfortunately here, I should have pulled the greatswords back immediately, but I don't. And so these guys are going to get on my mortars and start slaughtering the crews and take them offline rather quickly. So a bit of a disaster for me. Also, buffers are still in full flight, and unfortunately this is going to mean my opponent is constantly going to be able to rally. These Knights of the Realm are going to be coming back. These units like these foot squires rallying in the distance. And Balthazar here running for dear life, just trying to stay one step ahead of the competition. But over here we are going to get a nice meaty rear charge into these peasants, into this filthy rabble. And we're going to do some work, and especially with the Royal of Fights in there, the terror is going to start kicking off, which is a huge boon against trash troops like this. Just being able to force a rout quickly. Unfortunately, though, despite my best efforts, Knights of the Realm here are simply able to disengage. The greatswords are not able to get in on them, and they're still running amok. And my knights are still bogged down over here fighting trash. So, yeah, we're in deep doo-doo, and you can see the balance of power shifting in my opponent's favor as he runs amok in the backline and guts these mortars over here. These swordsmen over here were routed, and instead of pursuing these guys, which maybe I should have, I start pulling them back, trying to consolidate my troops. But here in the pocket, things are a bit disastrous. The greatswords doing their country proud, upholding their vow never to rout in the face of the enemy, even as these cowardly demigryphs decide to bail, to cut and run. So the greatswords really holding the line here. The warrior priest, he's there, he's doing his best with the Royal of fights, but at this point everyone's so beat up. But we are going to get another final transmutation. Now it misses everything important. Well, it misses Lewin, but it hits everything else. And you can see as these knights charge in, they're actually going to charge into the final transmutation and melt. So they die, and my opponent loses basically everything here. He loses caster, and this pocket of troops starts to fall apart, which is a huge win for me, getting a meaty transmutation like that. Despite the balance of power being very bad right now, we're not in that bad of a spot. If we take an overarching look at the battlefield, we can see these knights full retreat. Still a healthy unit of greatswords over here, 63 models. Well, by the standards of this game, healthy unit of greatswords over here on 38 models. And there's still a warrior priest around kicking with all his buffs and debuffs going on. There's still these 3 demigryph knights on a minuscule amount of HP, chopping at Lewin. And Lewin, of course, not the tankiest. He's an okay duelist on Biagas, but not the most amazing. So he's kind of struggling. And I'm actually coming in for a meaty rear charge with Balthazar. And of course, as we know, Balthazar, one of the best shock assault lords in the game. He's got the 70 charge bonus on Quicksilver, and he's going to come in and hit these foot squires. And of course, with the Demigryphs and the Mystics still sitting on one proud model, I think, we are going to be forcing an immediate rout. And you can see these foot squires tear out, these foot squires tear out, and it turns into chain tear out, leaving Lewin very isolated, which is great for me. Lewin being isolated means that I can now surround him. You can see we're getting greatsword hits in there. The Empire Captain is in there, providing his buffs and respectable melee stats. Balthazar's in there, and suddenly Louis is in full rout as this fresh unit of greatswords comes into the fray, and we're pinstering these guys pretty hard. Now, realizing that my opponent still has a good bit to go on Lewin. Now, Lewin can't heal anymore because he has routed. But if Lewin comes back right now at 1400 HP to rally these men here, it's going to be game over. I don't really have the troops to win this, I don't think. So what I do here is I do grab Balthazar, and I go chase Lewin off the field. So Balthazar didn't manage to extricate himself. He's on 150 kills. He's been doing monstrous work with transmutation, and he is able to pursue Lewin. At this point, my opponent's army is going to start to rout. You can see the lone unit of Varl Griffites here chasing off the Knights of the Realm. Lone model there, just hero of the people. And at this point, the Greatswords, with all those buffs from the Warrior Priest, who's actually on 9 HP right now, just keeping things together. He is a true patriot there of the Empire, holding things together. And we pull through for a win for Sigmar in the end. Now, this game was, in my opinion, fraught with misplays. Well, there's a lot I messed up on. Mispositioning greatswords at critical times. For example, that cavalry fight, which had started out going very well for me, disintegrated into almost a disaster because my opponent got infantry into the fight when I did not. Never underestimate the value of having infantry in a fight. As far as cavalry investment, I invested probably about as heavily into that cav fight as my opponent did. I spent almost 30 wounds of magic just on that final transmutation, which probably knocked off a good chunk of these cav. The 2 Knights of the Realm are like 1,000 apiece, 950 apiece. You know, Companions of Canal 1,500 or so. So you're looking at like 3,500 for those knights, and then another 2,500, let's say, for King Louis. So, you know, 6,000 for the cav contingent, compared to, you know, 3,500 for the Demigryphs, about 1,000 for the Warrior Priest. So about 4,500, 500 for the captain. I paid a little less than my opponent, about 1,000 less. But then Balthazar Magic is thrown into the mix as well. So the cavalry fight was kind of where the match was going to be decided, and I almost blew it. Just losing so many Demigryph Knights on the retreat when I was desperately trying to escape that infantry, and they're all getting in the way, and it's preventing me from escaping. I really needed those greatswords moving, that unit of greatswords in the fight sooner, just to bog my opponent down, prevent him from pushing through. And it was really just a huge misplay on my part. I didn't do that. So I took really disproportionate losses in the Demigryphs, especially the Royal Fights. Took way too much damage from Lewin, and it almost cost me the game. Otherwise, just failing to defend the backline properly against Knights of the Realm, which was kind of a result of how badly I performed earlier with the Cav, or how badly I got them out of the fight. And things like that kind of came darn near to costing me the game. As far as the build, you know, the swordsmen doing great. Now, a lot of this was against peasant mobs and trash troops, but still, a lot of these kills were also against foot squires. It's important to keep in mind, swordsmen are no pushovers in melee. Empire swordsmen don't have issues with leadership. They've got issues with armor, to a lesser extent HP, but they don't have issues with melee stats. The melee stats are actually very solid. They're 32 baseline, which is great. And if you buff that up a bit, they're sitting in like the low or the mid 30s, even low 40s, which is great for such a cheap unit. You can get them very cheap. So they were just really able to hold the line for way longer than they should have against the foot squires and the peasant mobs and the trash there. Mortars broke up the peasant bows really effectively, forced them off the field, and then got some good work against pole arms and foot squires. Probably easily paid for themselves over the course of that game, but losing them to Cav, once again, big mistake. These Knights of the Realms, champions of the people, but they hurt me hard, taking about 2,000 gold worth of mortars off the field. In retrospect for the build, I do think it's a decent build against Brettonia. As far as a few issues, one, I don't have any counters to mounted yeomen, which you will sometimes see in this matchup. They're not an unheard of pick. Two, no healing. This is not necessarily the end of the world, but especially with the benefits to regrowth, I could see Empire having a more of an advantage in the healing game. Perhaps dumping the Warrior Priest in favor of a Archlector and switching Balthazar out for a Lore of Life caster could have been better. The Warrior Priest did some great work, but the Warrior Priest and the Empire Captain did me proud, I would say. The Empire Captain comes in with his +5 melee defense, which is surprisingly good. +4 leadership, +5 melee defense. You really jack up those stats on your troops, which is really important, I think. It adds up. You get that +5 melee defense, you get that +4 leadership, then you get +8 leadership from the Warrior Priest. That's already a huge benefit when you're worried about terror routes. Then you get all the castable buffs from the Warrior Priest, and you can rewind them because of Scroll of Power. So, some really powerful stuff. As far as my opponent's build goes, I do think it's an okay build. I think there's not enough cavalry here. If your opponent plays one better than I did, which doesn't necessarily take that much, I done goofed with the cav. But if your opponent goes more heavy on the cav, or plays the cav game a little differently, I don't think this is going to cut it. He blobbed up and he couldn't go toe-to-toe with the 2 demigriffs at all, even with Lewin thrown into the mix. This build just can't do that. I personally really like Hippogriff Knights. I personally think bringing more Questing Knights is not bad. My personal favorite combo is something like Knights Errant, especially the Regiment of Renown, Questing Knights, Companions of Canal, and then 1 or 2 units of Hippogriff Knights, and dump Lewin entirely. But that's just my 2 cents. Otherwise, I don't think the build's bad. I do think it's a respectable infantry-based build and can definitely work out. But regardless, well played to my opponent, Elian here. It was a tight match, came right down to the wire. I do hope you guys enjoyed the video. Hope you found it entertaining and fun and all that good stuff. If you did, be sure to leave a like, subscribe, share. I do appreciate your support. If you have any comments and criticism, as usual, don't hesitate to post them down below. I'll do my best to respond as soon as I can. I do thank you all for watching, and I will see you all in the next one. Bye for now.